Oops, clumsy me. Victoria Sharp's voice oozed fake sweetness, her eyes glittering with pure malice. Cold, dark soda drenched Eleanor Hayes, soaking her simple cardigan, plastering strands of hair to her face, ruining the important papers spread across her desk. Guess you needed a bath after all. Derisive laughter erupted around Ellie. This is priceless. Office meltdown. Olivia Morgan squealed, her phone held high, gleefully recording every second of the degradation. Beside her, Daniel Bishop howled, slapping his knee. Dripping, shaking, Ellie slowly looked up, shame burning her cheeks, but failing to extinguish the sudden cold fire igniting in her eyes. They saw a simple woman. They saw weakness. They saw someone who didn't belong. They had absolutely no idea who they had just crossed. And they definitely didn't see the furious billionaire husband who was already on his way to burn their world to the ground. The polished chrome and frosted glass of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions gleamed under the relentless fluorescent lights, reflecting a world obsessed with image. It was a place where ambition smelled faintly of expensive cologne, and the click of designer heels on polished concrete floors served as a constant competitive heartbeat. Amidst this symphony of sharp angles and sharper ambitions sat Eleanor Hayes, Ellie, a quiet island of calm concentration in a turbulent sea. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, coaxing intricate patterns from raw data streams that would make most eyes glaze over. Just this morning, she'd spotted a subtle anomaly in the Q3 projections, a tiny digital ripple that suggested a market shift no one else had noticed. She made a quiet note, a small thrill running through her. The thrill of finding order in chaos, the very reason she navigated this gleaming, often cold environment. She preferred the logic of numbers to the often illogical maneuvers of her colleagues. A shadow fell over her monitor, bringing with it the cloying scent of designer perfume. Victoria Sharp, an account manager, whose tailored blazers were as sharp as her tongue, leaned in conspiratorially, though her voice carried across the open-plan office. Ellie, darling. Vicky purred her eyes, flicking dismissively over Ellie's simple, comfortable grey cardigan. That sweater is brave. Did you inherit it from a particularly drab aunt? A few stifled snickers echoed nearby. Ellie felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks, but offered a small, polite smile, her gaze fixed on her screen. Yes, Vicky Ellie thought a ghost of a smirk playing only in her mind. This particular cardigan holds the secret to surviving meetings led by people who value PowerPoint font choices over actual results. Very rare. She kept typing her focus, unwavering. Vicky denied a reaction, sniffed disdainfully, and sauntered away, her heels clicking an announcement of her own perceived importance. Soon, Vicky's usual acolytes materialized near Ellie's workspace, like satellites drawn into a toxic orbit. Daniel Bishop, a sales rep whose confidence far outstripped his competence, leaned against a divider smirking. Olivia Morgan, a junior designer who seemed to measure her self-worth in Instagram likes, subtly angled her phone. Seriously, Ellie Dan drawled loud enough for effect. Do you even own anything? Not beige. Shh. Daniel, scare it, Liv whispered back, not quite successfully, as she tried to capture a picture of Ellie's sensible flats. The narrator might have added with a touch of irony that Liv, a budding connoisseur of candid workplace tragedies, was trying to find the perfect angle to frame Ellie's footwear as a crime against fashion. Ellie ignored them, her focus a shield against their petty barbs. Why did she stay? Why endure this daily gauntlet? Only Ellie knew the quiet promise she'd made the personal summit. She was determined to scale on her own terms, without a safety net, woven from someone else's name. Across the aisle, Sarah, another analyst, winced slightly as she overheard the exchange. She met Ellie's eyes for a fleeting second, offering a look of pained sympathy, before quickly burying her head back in her spreadsheet. Sarah understood the office dynamics. Challenging Vicky's clique was career suicide, a risk she wasn't willing to take. The morning wore on, a low hum of keyboard taps and murmured phone calls filling the air. Mike Evans, the team lead, bustled past. He wasn't malicious like Vicky or Dan, merely oblivious, easily swayed by confident presentations and office politics, often overlooking the quiet competence Ellie consistently delivered. He paused by Ellie's desk, dropping a thick folder with a thud. "Hayes," he said, already turning away. "Need these client reports collated and summarized by 4. Drop everything else." Ellie glanced at the folder. Routine data entry, something an intern could handle, and completely unrelated to the urgent projection analysis she was deeply immersed in. "Mike," she began softly, "I'm working on the Q3 forecast you needed by end of day." "Just get it done, Hayes," Mike interrupted, waving a dismissive hand without looking back. "Team player, remember." Ellie pressed her lips together, the unfairness stinging, but nodded silently. She reshuffled her priorities, meticulously organizing the tedious reports. Later that afternoon, in a small impromptu team meeting, called by Mike to address a minor client query, the subtle sabotage began. As Mike rambled about synergy and deliverables, Vicky, standing near the projector laptop supposedly to assist, made a few swift, almost invisible clicks while everyone else looked at Mike. When it was Ellie's turn to present her findings on the query, derived from the very data Vicky had access to moments before she clicked to the crucial summary slide, it was blank. A collective blink rippled through the small group. Ellie frowned, confused. She knew that slide was complete. Mike Evans sighed dramatically, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Hayes. Really, we need accuracy here. Attention to detail. I expected better." His tone wasn't overtly cruel, just weary and disappointed, which somehow felt worse. Vicky shot Ellie a look of faux sympathy that barely concealed her triumph. Dan smirked openly. Sarah stared intently at her notepad. Ellie felt a cold knot form in her stomach. It wasn't just incompetence. It felt targeted. She met Mike's gaze evenly. "There seems to be a technical issue, Mike. The data was finalized. I can pull up the source file." Her voice was steady, betraying none of the frustration simmering beneath. "Just fix it later," Mike muttered, moving on the moment lost the blame implicitly settled on Ellie. The meeting ended. As the others filed out, Ellie remained her expression calm, but her eyes holding a new flicker of steel. She quickly navigated back to the source file on her drive, found the complete summary slide, exactly where it should be, untouched. Someone had deliberately deleted it from the presentation copy. Her gaze drifted towards Vicky's retreating back. The quiet storm inside Ellie gathered force. Though outwardly, she remained an picture of composure already back at work. Her quiet competence, her only and often overlooked weapon. For now. The air in the office thickened in the days following the meeting mishap. The subtle chill Ellie had felt before now had icy edges. Vicky Sharp no longer bothered with thinly veiled barbs. Her disdain was a cold, hard stare across the room. Dan Bishop's smirks became sneers, and Liv Morgan's phone camera seemed permanently pointed in Ellie's general direction. "Hey, Hayes!" Dan's voice boomed across the cubicles one lunchtime, deliberately loud. He'd just returned, bragging about his new sports car lease. "Saw someone who looked just like you waiting for the bus this morning. Still roughing it with the common folk, huh?" He chuckled, nudging a colleague who offered a nervous laugh in return. Ellie didn't look up from the salad she'd brought from home. Detective Dan strikes again, with another groundbreaking observation. She mused internally, taking a deliberately slow bite of lettuce. Tomorrow, perhaps, he'll investigate the fascinating mystery of whether my stapler prefers premium or regular staples. The suspense is killing me. Liv, meanwhile, was less direct, but equally persistent. Her Instagram stories, often viewed by colleagues during coffee breaks, featured cryptic captions alongside blurry shots of Ellie's worn tote bag or sensible shoes. Hashtags like office life, some people try too hard and minimalist fail told their own petty tale. Ellie felt the constant scrutiny like a physical weight. There were moments, usually late in the evening when the office lights dimmed and the competitive hum faded, that she allowed herself to feel the full brunt of it. Tucked away in her purse was a small, slightly worn photo frame she rarely looked at during work hours. It held a picture of her and Alex. Her Alex, not Alexander Sterling, the titan of industry, taken years ago in college. Him grinning, wearing a faded university sweatshirt, her leaning against him, shyly smiling. They looked so young, so unaware of the dizzying heights his ambition would reach. She remembered their conversation, a quiet pact made over cheap pizza, the night before she started at Pinnacle. He'd offered to make calls smooth her path, but she'd refused. 1 year, Alex, she'd insisted. Let me do this myself on my own merit. Let me prove I belong in this world, not just as Mrs. Sterling, but as Ellie Hayes. He'd respected her wish, his pride in her fierce independence, outweighing his protective instincts. Mostly. Sometimes late at night, he'd call from whatever time zone he was in. So Agent Hayes, his voice warm and familiar, would rumble through the phone, a lifeline across the miles. How goes Operation Corporate Infiltration? Gathered any useful intel on the enemy's, break room, coffee preferences. She'd laugh, the tension melting away for a few precious minutes. Intel suggests a strong preference for mediocre and slightly burnt Agent Sterling. Nothing worth reporting back to HQ. That easy banter, that connection, was her anchor. But the promise was a promise. 1 year. She just had to hold on. The opportunity to truly shine, however, arrived unexpectedly. Pinnacle had landed a major new client, a sustainable tech startup, but the initial campaign pitches led by Vicky's team were falling flat. They were glossy, generic, and failed to capture the client's innovative spirit. Mike Evans was visibly stressed, his usual bluster replaced by a nervous energy. Ellie, tasked with analyzing the background market data for the client, had been working late, diving deep into consumer trends and competitor blind spots. And then she saw it, a hidden correlation, a niche demographic the bigger agencies had overlooked, passionately interested in both cutting-edge tech and verifiable sustainability credentials. It required a completely different marketing angle, less corporate sheen, more authentic connection. It was complex, data-heavy, but potentially game-changing. The next day, Mike called an emergency brainstorming session. The mood was grim. Vicky presented her revised, but still bland, concepts with forced confidence. Dan offered vague buzzwords about synergy. The air grew thick with frustration. Ellie took a deep breath. This was it. She raised her hand tentatively. Mike, I might have something. She began, her voice quiet but clear. She walked them through her data screen by screen, explaining the correlations, the demographic insights, the proposed alternative strategy. She spoke with the quiet authority that came from truly understanding her subject. There was a stunned silence when she finished. Dan scoffed. Liv rolled her eyes. Mike looked uncertain, glancing nervously at Vicky. Vicky recovered first plastering on a condescending smile. Well, Ellie, that's a lot of numbers. Very academic. But this client needs real-world impact, not a thesis paper. Before Mike could agree, a voice cut through the tension. On the contrary, Ms. Sharp, I find Ms. Hayes's analysis exceptionally insightful. All heads turned. Mr. Harrison, the senior VP of strategy, Mike's boss's boss, stood leaning against the doorframe. He must have slipped in unnoticed during Ellie's presentation. He walked further into the room, his sharp eyes fixed on Ellie with genuine interest. That demographic insight, Ms. Hayes. Mr. Harrison continued ignoring Vicky completely, is precisely the kind of disruptive thinking this client values. It aligns perfectly with their brand ethos. Forget the generic campaigns. I want a full proposal based on this data on my desk by Monday morning. Excellent work. He gave Ellie a curt, approving nod before turning to leave, addressing Mike as he went, "Evans ensure Ms. Hayes has all the resources she needs." The room felt charged, polarized. Ellie felt a dizzying mix of elation and sudden, sharp anxiety. It was the first real, undeniable validation she'd received. But the look on Vicky Sharp's face as Mr. Harrison walked away, it wasn't just annoyance anymore. It was cold, calculated fury. The narrator might observe with a touch of dark humor that Vicky looked as though someone had just suggested her prized platinum credit card be replaced with a library card. The brief glimmer of defiance had just painted a much larger target on Ellie's back. The storm wasn't just gathering anymore. It was about to break. The air crackled with unspoken hostility the following morning. Ellie's brief moment of recognition from Mr. Harrison had acted like gasoline on the smoldering resentment of Vicky Sharp and her cohorts. They moved in a tight, whispering knot, their glances towards Ellie's desk, no longer just disdainful, but openly venomous. Ellie tried to focus, immersing herself in the Harrison proposal, the positive feedback, a small, warm coal against the encroaching chill. Around mid-morning, Vicky approached her smile dazzlingly false. She carried a teetering pile of disorganized folders, bound loosely with rubber bands. "Ellie, sweetie." Vicky cooed, dumping the precarious stack directly onto Ellie's meticulously arranged notes for the Harrison proposal. Papers scattered. "So sorry to bother you, but Mike needs this ancient client archive sorted immediately." Team effort, you know. Ellie looked at the dusty, irrelevant files, then back at her screen where the Harrison deadline loomed. "Vicky, I really can't right now," she said, keeping her voice level. "Mr. Harrison needs this proposal by Monday." Vicky's smile vanished, replaced by a sneer. "Oh, too important for team tasks. Now, are we?" "Got one little compliment from Harrison, and suddenly you think you're above the rest of us." Her voice rose, attracting attention from nearby desks. "Let's be real, Ellie. You're just filling a seat. No style, no connections, barely even here half the time mentally." Dan Bishop swaggered over, leaning against Ellie's cubicle wall. "Yeah, seriously. What's your deal anyway? All quiet and mousy? Bet you live in some tiny shoebox apartment counting pennies for ramen noodles." Liv Morgan chimed in, phone already out, though, pretending to adjust her makeup using its reflection. "Maybe she's just shy," Liv added, with exaggerated pity. "Or maybe just incredibly boring." Ellie gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles white. The insults were coarser now, more personal. She could feel eyes on her, the familiar mix of curiosity and morbid interest from her other colleagues. Sarah looked up, chewed her lip, then quickly looked down again, fiddling nervously with a pen. "I have work to do." Ellie stated her voice, low but firm, pushing the offending folders aside slightly to make room for her actual work. That simple act of defiance seemed to ignite something ugly in Vicky. Her eyes narrowed into slits. "You think you can just push us aside?" she hissed. She snatched up a large, half-full cup of dark soda, left carelessly on a nearby filing cabinet. "Oops!" Vicky exclaimed with mock horror, stumbling dramatically towards Ellie's desk. The dark, sticky liquid arced through the air, splashing directly onto Ellie's cardigan. Her hair and, cascading over the Harrison proposal notes, spread across her desk. The cold shock of the soda hitting her skin was followed instantly by the hot burn of humiliation. Gasps were quickly followed by snickers. Dan guffawed loudly. Liv Morgan, no longer pretending, filmed the scene openly. "Oh my God, Vicky, you're so clumsy!" Liv shrieked with laughter. "This is epic. Say goodbye to that proposal, Ellie, and maybe take a shower, Office meltdown, sticky situation. Ellie sat frozen for a second, the cold soda dripping down her face, matting her hair, pooling on the ruined papers. The smell of cheap cola filled the air. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Mike Evans' voice, approaching. Hope flickered for an instant. Surely the team lead would intervene now. Mike stopped short, taking in the scene. Ellie soaked and stunned the messy desk. Vicky feigning innocence amidst the snickering of Dan and Liv. His face tightened not with concern for Ellie, but with annoyance at the disruption. "What is all this racket?" he snapped, pointedly avoiding looking directly at Ellie's drenched form. "This isn't a playground. Keep the noise down and get back to work. Some of us have actual deadlines." He turned on his heel and marched back towards the sanctuary of his glass-walled office, shutting the door firmly behind him. The last vestiges of Ellie's composure fractured. The laughter of her tormentors, the calculated indifference of her boss, the averted eyes of her other colleagues. It all crashed down on her. She stood up slowly, deliberately, the sticky soda dripping onto the floor. She didn't look at Vicky, or Dan, or Liv. Her gaze was distant, fixed on something none of them could see. A chillingly calm expression settled on her features, overlaying the hurt. Ignoring the chorus of "Aw, is little Ellie gonna cry?" she walked stiff-backed towards the break room. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, her body began to shake, uncontrollably. She leaned against the cool metal of the refrigerator, gasping for air. Tears welled hot and furious, blurring her vision. The shame was a physical ache, the injustice a suffocating weight. The promise, the one-year challenge, felt utterly meaningless, now crushed under the weight of this deliberate, cruel degradation. This wasn't about proving herself anymore. This was about survival. Her trembling hand fumbled in her bag for her phone. She stared at the screen at the picture of Alex that served as her wallpaper, his confident smile a world away from her current reality. Could she do it? Could she break her promise call in the cavalry? The internal battle raged. Pride versus pain, determination versus despair. Then she thought of Vicky's triumphant smirk, Mike's dismissive wave. No, this wasn't just workplace friction. This was targeted abuse enabled by indifference, and it had to stop. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, she pressed the call icon. It rang once, twice. Ellie Alex's voice came through clear and blessedly normal. He sounded preoccupied, maybe in a meeting. "Everything all right? I was just about to head into a rather vigorous debate about fourth-quarter global logistics." She tried to speak, but only a choked sob escaped. The background noise on his end vanished instantly. His voice sharpened, shedding all traces of preoccupation, replaced by urgent concern. "Ellie, what's wrong? Talk to me." "Alex." She managed her voice, thick with tears and soda. It's bad. I can't." Who did what his voice was dangerously quiet, now laced with steel. "Where are you?" "Pinnacle," she whispered. 24th floor. The break room. There was a brief pause, filled only by the sound of his controlled breathing. Then his voice, low and final, a promise of retribution. "Stay there, Ellie. Don't move. I'm on my way." The line clicked dead, leaving Ellie leaning against the refrigerator, drenched, shaking, but with a tiny hard spark igniting in the depths of her despair. The reckoning was coming. Ellie pushed open the break room door, stepping back into the charged atmosphere of the office. Her cardigan was still damp, clinging uncomfortably, and the faint, sickly sweet smell of soda seemed to follow her like a shroud. But something had shifted in her posture. The earlier tremor was gone, replaced by a brittle, steely calm. Her eyes, usually soft and observant, now held a hard, clear focus. She ignored the sudden hush, the poorly concealed whispers, the wide-eyed stares. She walked directly to her desk. Vicky, Dan, and Liv watched her approach, a mixture of disbelief and smug anticipation on their faces. They expected tears, maybe a hurried exit. Decided to come back for another round. Hayes. Dan sneered, leaning back in his chair with false bravado. Or did you finally realize you can't just run away? Vicky smirked, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Maybe she needs help cleaning up her mess. It is rather unprofessional. Ellie didn't respond. She methodically began gathering the salvageable papers from the Harrison proposal, her movements precise, almost detached. The air thickened with unresolved tension. Seconds stretched into an agonizing minute. Colleagues pretended to work, but everyone was acutely aware of the silent standoff. Ding! The sound of the private elevator arriving on the floor sliced through the silence. It was rarely used, reserved for top executives or important clients. Heads snapped up. The polished steel doors slid open, revealing Alexander Sterling. He wasn't just tall. He seemed to command the very space around him. Dressed in a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit that whispered quiet authority and immense wealth, his dark hair swept back perfectly, his jaw set like granite. But it was his eyes. Sharp, intelligent, and currently blazing with a cold, controlled fury that swept the room and made several people visibly flinch. Pin-drop silence descended. Vicky's smirk froze, then faltered. Dan's cocky posture deflated. Liv's phone slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering unnoticed onto the carpet. Alex's gaze scanned the office, bypassing the expensive decor, the anxious faces, until it locked onto Ellie. The icy fury in his eyes softened fractionally, replaced by a wave of deep concern. He moved towards her, his stride purposeful, parting the stunned onlookers like a ship cutting through water. He reached her desk, his presence a palpable force field against the lingering hostility. He gently touched her arm, his eyes taking in her damp clothes, the sticky residue on her desk. Ellie, his voice was low, meant only for her, yet it seemed to resonate in the utter silence. "Are you all right?" Before Ellie could answer, Vicky Sharp, recovering her composure with astonishing speed, stepped forward, plastering on her most dazzling, insincere smile. "Mr. Sterling, what a wonderful surprise," she gushed, extending a hand he pointedly ignored. "We weren't expecting you. I'm Victoria Sharp, account manager. Can I get you anything?" "Coffee, water." Alex finally turned his attention from Ellie, his gaze sweeping over Vicky with an expression of utter disinterest that made her smile falter. "Personnel here seem overly enthusiastic, wouldn't you say, Ellie?" He murmured, a dry, almost imperceptible edge to his voice, before raising it slightly to address the room at large. His hand rested protectively on Ellie's shoulder. "For those of you operating under a severe misapprehension," he began, his voice dangerously smooth, cutting through the silence like a surgeon's scalpel, "allow me to provide some clarity." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. This he indicated Ellie, who stood beside him. Now her earlier composure returned, meeting his gaze with quiet strength. "Is Eleanor Hayes Sterling?" "My wife." The collective intake of breath was almost deafening. Vicky stumbled back a step, her face draining of all color. Dan Bishop looked like he'd been physically struck. Liv Morgan stared, mouth agape. Mike Evans, who had hesitantly emerged from his office, froze mid-step, his face a mask of dawning horror. Alex's gaze pinned Mike Evans first. "Mr. Evans, my wife informs me she reported directly to you. Is it standard practice at Pinnacle to allow your team members to be publicly harassed and physically assaulted while you, as their leader, offer no support? Perhaps you could enlighten me on your unique management philosophy." Alex paused, his expression arctic. "I appreciate creative thinking, Mr. Evans, but perhaps in this instance, silence would be your most prudent contribution." Mike opened and closed his mouth, utterly speechless. Alex's attention swiveled to Vicky Sharp. Ms. Sharp, your file suggests a certain ambition. Does that ambition typically involve sabotaging colleagues' work? He gestured towards the ruined papers on Ellie's desk, and leading coordinated campaigns of humiliation is dousing someone in soda considered a team-building exercise here. Vicky stammered. It was an accident. We were just joking. Joking, Alex repeated the word, dripping ice. Ah, yes. The universal defense for cruelty. Duly noted. He turned to Dan Bishop. Mr. Bishop, your expertise seems to lie in loudly assessing the financial status and mode of transport of your colleagues based purely on prejudice. An invaluable skill, I'm sure, though curiously absent from your official job description. Dan flushed crimson, unable to meet Alex's glacial stare. Finally, Alex's gaze fell on Liv Morgan, who was trying to discreetly retrieve her fallen phone. Ms. Morgan, your commitment to digitally documenting acts of malice is remarkable. A true pioneer in the field of inappropriate workplace content creation. His voice was dangerously soft. Perhaps you'll have ample time now to curate your personal feed. Say, focusing on job hunting tips. Alex Sterling straightened his voice, regaining its commanding volume, resonating through the stunned office. Effective immediately, the employment of Michael Evans, Victoria Sharp, Daniel Bishop, and Olivia Morgan at Pinnacle Marketing Solutions is terminated. He let the words hang in the air. This decision is final and non-negotiable. Your access has been revoked. Security is on their way up to escort you from the premises. And understand this clearly, his eyes swept over the 4 terminated employees lingering on Vicky Sterling Group has a long memory. Attempting to find employment within any of our subsidiary companies, or potentially with any company that values ethical conduct and basic human decency, might prove challenging. The finality was absolute, but desperation sparked defiance in Vicky. Her face twisted into an ugly snarl. You can't just... She tricked you. She's playing you. A gold digger in rags. We all saw it. She laughed at us behind our backs. Dan, finding his voice in panic, chimed in. Yeah, she's manipulative. Probably slept her way. Enough. Alex's voice wasn't loud, but it cracked like a whip, silencing them instantly. He stepped slightly in front of Ellie. Your baseless accusations now are as pathetic as your behavior before. He looked directly at Vicky and Dan, his eyes filled with utter contempt. Impressive. Your flair for spontaneous melodrama is truly something. A pity it's wasted on such a predictable script. He lowered his voice again, cold and sharp. My wife possesses more integrity, intelligence, and inherent worth in her little finger than the 4 of you combined possess in your entire beings. You judged her by your own shallow standards and found yourselves wanting. Her dignity, he stated, his voice, ringing with conviction, is not yours to touch comment on or even comprehend. Right on cue, the elevator dinged again. 2 uniformed security guards stepped out, their expressions impassive, their presence signaling the undeniable end. The game was over. The reckoning had arrived. The 2 security guards moved forward with quiet efficiency. Vicky Sharp erupted in a fresh wave of furious, incoherent protests as one guard firmly took her arm. She tried to wrench away her expensive blazer, twisting awkwardly. Dan Bishop simply stared blankly ahead, shock rendering him immobile, as the second guard guided him towards the elevator. Liv Morgan dissolved into noisy, gulping sobs, mascara streaking her face as she stumbled along, clutching futilely at her bag. And Michael Evans, his face pale and slack, looked like a man whose world had just crumbled beneath his feet. He offered no resistance, shuffling forward like a ghost. The remaining employees of Pinnacle Marketing Solutions watched in stunned, absolute silence as the quartet was escorted into the waiting elevator. The doors slid shut, sealing their fate. The tension in the air didn't immediately dissipate. It lingered thick with unspoken questions and the chilling echo of Alexander Sterling's authority. Alex turned to Ellie, his expression softening as he gently brushed a stray, soda-sticky strand of hair from her cheek. "Ready to go home?" he asked softly. Ellie nodded, a deep, shuddering breath escaping her. She gathered her few personal belongings, including the now-ruined Harrison proposal notes, stuffing them unceremoniously into her worn tote bag. As Alex placed a steadying arm around her shoulders, guiding her towards the elevator, Ellie paused for a fraction of a second. Her gaze swept across the silent faces, watching them finally landing on Sarah. The other analyst met her eyes briefly, then looked down quickly, a flush of shame creeping up her neck. Ellie offered no judgment, only a quiet acknowledgement, before turning away and stepping into the elevator beside Alex. The doors closed, leaving the chaos of Pinnacle behind them. Weeks turned into months. The dramatic events at Pinnacle became hushed legend whispered about in industry circles. The consequences for those involved unfolded not with dramatic fanfare, but with the quiet, inevitable pull of gravity. Vicky Sharp, attempting to leverage her contacts, found doors politely but firmly closed. In one particularly bruising interview, the HR manager looked up from her resume, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. Victoria Sharp. Pinnacle Marketing. Ah, yes. I'm afraid the position requires someone with a proven track record in collaborative team environments. Thank you for your time. Vicky left, fuming the rejection, stinging more than any insult she had ever hurled. Daniel Bishop stripped of his bravado, and Easy Charm found himself working a physically demanding job at a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. One evening, exhausted and grease-stained, he watched a sleek black car, identical to Alex Sterling's, glide past. He kicked viciously at a stray pallet, the bitterness, a familiar, acrid taste in his mouth. Liv Morgan tried desperately to relaunch her online persona, curating images of a glamorous, successful life. But the comment sections were brutal, flooded with reminders of the Pinnacle incident, hashtags like office bully and karma is real, dogging her every post. Her followers dwindled, her influencer dreams dissolving into digital dust. And Michael Evans. He simply vanished from the corporate world, his reputation irrevocably tarnished, a cautionary tale whispered among middle managers. Ellie Hayes, however, flourished. She never set foot in Pinnacle again. Instead, she transformed a spare room in her and Alex's sunlit apartment into a bright minimalist office. She launched her own freelance data analysis consultancy, specializing in helping small, ethically minded businesses navigate the often intimidating world of market data. One afternoon found her sitting across from Maria, the owner of a small artisanal bakery whose passion was evident, but whose marketing budget was tiny. Ellie had spent weeks analyzing local purchasing patterns and online engagement for Maria's business. "Ellie, I don't know how to thank you," Maria exclaimed, looking at the clear, actionable marketing plan Ellie had presented. Charts and graphs suddenly seemed less daunting, illuminated by Ellie's patient explanations. "Since we implemented your suggestions last month, online, orders have tripled. Foot traffic is up. It's like magic." Ellie smiled, a genuine warm expression that lit up her face. "It's not magic, Maria, just logic, and listening to what the numbers and your customers are telling you." She leaned forward conspiratorially, a playful glint in her eye. "Think of it as applying some hard-earned, real-world experience from a very competitive previous environment." Maria laughed, grateful. This felt right. This was using her skills not just for profit, but for purpose. That evening, Ellie stood with Alex on their penthouse balcony, the glittering expanse of the Chicago skyline spread before them like a carpet of diamonds. She leaned against him, comfortable in a soft, cozy sweater. a far cry from the infamous grey cardigan. The city lights danced in her hazel eyes, so Alex began a teasing warmth in his voice as he wrapped his arms around her. Now that your undercover stint as Ellie Hayes' mild-mannered analyst is officially over, have you considered writing a memoir, perhaps titled Cardigans and Corporate Combat: How I Survived the Marketing Jungle? Ellie laughed, swatting his arm playfully. Very funny. Maybe I'll include a chapter on the strategic importance of marrying a billionaire who owns the parent company. That chapter would undoubtedly be a bestseller. Alex chuckled, kissing the top of her head. Though I maintain my favorite part was your brilliant data takedown of their failing campaign before the fireworks. That was satisfying, Ellie admitted, smiling. But you know the real satisfaction. She gestured towards the city, is helping people like Maria, using data to build something positive instead of just climbing a ladder in uncomfortable shoes, and that Eleanor Hayes Sterling. Alex said, turning her gently to face him, his expression full of love and pride is why Sterling Group's most valuable asset isn't a skyscraper or a tech patent. It's you. He grinned. Even when you insisted on wearing those, sensible shoes. Ellie rolled her eyes, but leaned into his embrace, the warmth spreading through her, chasing away the last lingering shadows of Pinnacle. She had faced down cruelty and indifference, not by adopting their tactics, but by staying true to herself, by leaning on love, and by finally, powerfully reclaiming her own narrative. She hadn't needed the Sterling name to be worthy. She just needed to remember the strength that had always been hers, Ellie Hayes, finder of patterns, solver of problems, survivor. And looking out at the city lights, holding the hand of the man she loved, she knew deep in her soul that she was more than enough. The peace she felt wasn't just given. It was earned. Wow, what a journey that was, watching Ellie navigate such cruelty and emerge not just unscathed, but stronger, shining brighter, because she stayed true to herself. It truly makes you wonder, doesn't it? How often do we judge the book by its cover, mistaking quietness for weakness or simplicity for lack of worth? Perhaps the most profound strength like Ellie's doesn't need shouting or fanfare. Sometimes it's a quiet, steady light burning within, waiting for its moment. Ellie's story really reminds us of the power of resilience and the importance of looking beyond appearances, maybe seeing reflections of these struggles and triumphs in the world around us, or even within ourselves. If this emotional journey touched you as much as it touched us, we'd love to hear from you. What part of Ellie's story resonated most deeply with you? Was it her quiet dignity under pressure, Alex's unwavering support, or perhaps the moment justice was finally served? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We also truly value your constructive feedback. If you have any ideas on how we can make future stories even more compelling, or if there's anything about today's storytelling you think we could improve, please don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your input is incredibly important and helps us grow and bring you better content each time. If Ellie's story touched your heart or reminded you of the importance of inner worth, please give this video a like. It truly helps us reach more people. And share it with anyone you think might find strength, validation, or just a little bit of hope in her journey. For more stories that explore the depths of human emotion and the triumph of the spirit, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell so you won't miss the next emotional adventure we share together. Thank you so much for watching and being a part of our community today. Until next time, take care and remember the strength within you.